Welcome to Abstract Illusions Radio with host Jennifer Hillman. The show explores and reveals the human potential through creativity. So enjoy the show to create a life you love. Welcome to Abstract Illusions Radio with host Jennifer Hillman. The show explores and reveals the human potential through creativity. So enjoy the show to create a life you love.
Hello everyone, this is Jennifer Hillman and this is Abstract Illusions, where we contemplate and explore the different aspects of the human potential and how creative we can be in this wonderful abstract illusions we have. This week I'm having a very special friend, Kip Baldwin, who we could probably talk for about a year solid because we always have interesting conversations. I recently was on his show and we had such a good time. I said, I have to have Kip back on. So Kip is a producer, an actor, a radio host. He has his own radio on WLOR.net himself called Just Love Radio. So Kip, thank you again for once again gracing us with your thoughts, your humor, and your beautiful presence.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. And you know, we just literally couldn't end the last conversation, so of course I had to come on.
Yes, really.
And I don't think a year is quite enough time. I think we need probably an infinity just to impart one of those other experiences we're having just to chat.
Yes, we do tend to just be, and we just go back and forth, and it's just like we're able to ask questions and answer, and just the motivation between us and the synchronicities and the chemistry that just keeps the momentum of the conversation uplifting and just really expanding our energies. And we truly have a true understanding of empathy, and that's what we're going to be talking about, is that understanding that people tend to want to have more empathy and compassion for people, but sometimes that concept of empathy can blur the lines. And what are your thoughts on empathy these days?
Well, you know, we were chatting about some experiences that I've had literally since we ended our last conversation, but sort of inspired by our last conversation because I was sort of involved in those meditations, and then our last conversation sort of asked me to delve further into it, which I did. But before I talk about that, I want to share something that is connected in sort of in an interesting way. So I was watching, of all things, well, not of all things, it's a good show, America's Got Talent last night. And they have this young man, he's 14 years old, who is one of the most beautiful dancers you've ever seen. He's also blind. He's been slowly losing his sight. His eyes are literally dying. That's what his disease is. And from the time he first auditioned for the show to now, he's, you know, literally it's down to what he can see is like a microscopic pinpoint. And why this is important, because as a dancer, to do like a lot of the spins and everything he does, you have to have a fixed point. He has no way to have that fixed point or to know how big the stage is or anything, but yet he moves around it with this grace and fearlessness and balance. And the way he's learned to compensate for this is by, instead of having a fixed point, he's so in tune with his body that he makes the minor adjustments in balance just as he can sense it within himself. And you're watching this and you're feeling so uplifted and so moved and so like, oh my God, I don't really have anything in my own life I can't overcome, anything I can't move beyond. And I started to think about that in relationship to empathy and saying, we are always having these empathetic experiences. That feeling that washed over the entire audience, that washed over me, that was empathy with him. He was
Mm-hmm.
sharing this with us and moving through us. And I wrote something today concerning that I'd like to share if you don't mind.
Oh, please do.
With Baryshnikov grace, divinely blessed, I spin, I leap impossibly for all to see. As though I am blind, with eyes of the soul, I dance the ballet of love, that I may inspire spirits long grounded to once more soar, broken hearts unable to heal again to feel. That is why, through my eyes, that is why, though my eyes are broken, I twirl and fly for them to free, for me to be. And then I found a couple of interesting quotes that one was from Paulo Coelho of The Alchemist fame, of course. When we love, we always strive to become better than we are. When we strive to become better than we are, everything around us becomes better too. And then I found another one from Hafez. And still, after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, "You owe me." Look what happens. A love like that, it lights up the whole sky. Isn't that just a beautiful definition of what empathy kind of is?
It really is. It really is. And it's very true. I mean, empathy these days, as we were discussing right before we got to, it really is kind of this buzzword, but at the same time, it's a time that we need to have more empathy. We need to have that connection with other people to understand what they're going through. It's like that saying, you need to walk in somebody's shoes for a mile or 100 miles really to understand who and what they are about. Empathy helps us get that understanding. And it might be just a few seconds or a few minutes. It was like before I was talking to you about an experience I had when I went over the Oakland Bridge, and I relived a woman's death as she died during the earthquake. What year was that? 92?
91, 92, yeah.
Yeah. And what her last thoughts were her 7-year-old daughter. I mean, I literally saw her hair, and she had a blue suit on, and I didn't see her car. I'm getting chills now. Um, but I really felt the weight on her chest and her unable to breathe, and her just wanting her daughter to know how much she loved her and that she was going to be with her. And afterwards, after I got out of that, because I actually was driving and wanting to go to sleep as I'm driving. Thank goodness I was talking to someone at the time. But I did research and I actually found that woman um, did have a child who is about, at the time, it was a few years ago, which now she'd probably be about 25. Um, and, or maybe even a little older. But at the time I thought, well, maybe I should contact her, but I really couldn't figure out how. But it's like once you have those experiences, I can now understand what death is like, those last moments of death, and having that empathy. You recently had an experience you were telling me about helping somebody get to the hospital.
Oh, well, before I tell that story, I can't tell you I so washed over with emotion. I really feel that you need to find that girl if at all possible and give her your mom. I mean, it's like I'm sort of shaking right now. It's like you're supposed to do that. I
Okay,
kind of feel. Anyway, that's just what is really. I'm not supposed to move on until I tell you that.
okay.
Okay, so anyway, I was driving the other day. As a filmmaker, you aren't independently wealthy, much to everyone's surprise. And occasionally I'll drive Lyft to, fill in the gaps, or as I tell people, to stop hemorrhaging money between projects. And I picked up this couple in near the Castro in San Francisco, and the woman gets in, puts a blanket down, and I'm like, okay, it's a strange car. I get that. I would maybe put a blanket down, probably not, but I get why someone would. Then the husband gets in, have you told him yet? And she's like, oh no, I didn't want to make him nervous. And I'm like, nervous about what? Well, she's in labor and you're taking us to the hospital to have our baby. I'm like, not nervous at all. Best thing ever. And I was just so in the moment with them. And looking back now that I was having a truly joyous, empathetic experience with them. And I was thinking as you were talking, I was thinking that um, so much of this is just sort of a preparation for what we transform into next. And you and I have talked about, I've said for a long time to a lot of people, if I could have one superpower, it would be that I could inhabit not just in other people, but other beings. And of course, only with permission. You don't do stuff like that without asking first. Um, but how cool would that be to actually know, like, for me to be in Jennifer Hillman and go, wow, Jennifer Hillman sees the color blue this way. Jennifer Hillman
Hmm.
sees here's a violin this way, or to be a tree and to know what it's like to be a tree in a windstorm, or to know what it's like to, as Jennifer described, to die. And think about all the fear that actually ends up taking away from you ultimately to be able to have these experiences, almost like changing the channel from one television show to another. And we do it all the time. You go from a scary thing to a funny thing to this experience to that experience. And again, I think these are all outward manifestations of our next transformation, which will be free flowing spirits, free flowing souls, if you will.
Yes, definitely. And you know, having those experiences, and I've had many experiences where being in, and sometimes I don't even know how it happens, but all of a sudden I'll be experiencing something through somebody's eyes. And sometimes it's like I was in a person who, it was a father, and he was in the room and his wife was having his child, and he was holding his child for the first time and overwhelmed with the joy. I literally could feel his tears coming down his face with all the love he had for that child. So it is a beautiful experience, but it's like it really, being so blended with the oneness, at times you really need to remember you are an individual. This is the oneness, and I'm connecting to the oneness. And being able to find who Jennifer Hillman is again and not overtake or want more of that experience because that person's having a better life than mine, so I'm just going to clue into them. That's kind of like the energy vampire kind of deal.
Mm.
So, but there is a lot of blurring that can happen these days, more than people realize. Um, and I think that you'll have your chance to be able to do that even in this lifetime, Kip. I have
Mm.
no doubts. You've asked for it. I'm sure you'll get it.
Well, there's a show out there called have you heard of the show Sense 8?
Yes, you've
Yeah, that
mentioned
that's
it.
exactly
Yes.
what the show is about. And I'm watching this, I'm going, wow, okay, so we're going there now. And they almost get it. The only I mean, it's a really good show, except it's a little bit too action driven as far as this being something that needs to be controlled, and the government forces are out to get them and stuff, which is fine. It's done by the same guys that did The Matrix, and it definitely draws you in. If I were to make any suggestions for them with this show, is they don't I think there needs to be subtle changes in perception as the people move from one experience of the other. So, because I really do believe that you're not going to hear things the same, you're not going to see things the same, touch isn't going to feel the same, and I think to make slight adjustments in that would make that a more real show. But it's out there. It's moved from something people are chatting about or I'm bringing up in conversation or other people to it's now manifested itself as this television show, which is really phenomenal that that is now out in the zeitgeist because it's never been really, I don't think that's ever been done before.
I have said I might have even said to you many times, um, the entertainment industry really is foretelling us what's going to happen in this world, and give us a heads up. It's like somebody has this brilliant idea, okay, but then I always say, okay, are they planting the seeds so it happens, or is it really something that is in the game plan to happen?
You said something just a couple minutes ago, and I think that as we move to a place where we can have that next transformation, that next experience that we're describing, um, you use the word better. And I think that when we get to that place, that we're ready to have that, there won't be a better. There will be just, that it was Judith. I think Judith Blackstone. I got a lot of meditation techniques for her, and one thing when I was listening to her speak, I remember I was sitting by the ocean in Santa Cruz, and I was sitting in the car, and it was a strange time because it was just before my friend Matt Shotwell was going, star of We Country, the show I created, was going to have his dispensary raided. We obviously didn't know that was coming, but I could just feel this weird oppressive energy the whole weekend, and I was down shooting this film that I was acting in Monterey, and it was a really hard shoot. It was like 13 hours a day, and it was cold, and we were in these old army barracks that were all musty and everything. So I had to have a place of sanctuary, and I found a public radio station. I started listening to Judith talk, and she was very impressive. What her concept of self was. And she said, the idea that when we are, out of body, or, we're our true self, our soul self, that we don't have preferences, it isn't, to her mind, correct. It's not like you give up preferences, but what you give up is the idea that one preference is better than another preference. As we, and that's the difference between the soul self and then the societally created ego self that we have
Right.
here that isn't real. So I think we'll get to a place, and that also made me think about the idea of ending and where the other begins. And you know what? Maybe I'm overthinking that. Maybe that will just be very organic eventually, where, like you said, okay, I had enough of this experience with you. I'm going to go back over here, and we won't have to think about the beginning and ending, because we won't be unintentionally invading one another.
Exactly. But then it's like, are we living the dream within the dream as well? And we are, but it's like you bring up the whole concept of like Inception, the film Inception, and the fact that they knew that it was a dream within a dream and they took it through. And it's just, that's the kind of things that people need to understand. This is a dream. Your thoughts are what's creating what
Right.
you ask for. Be very careful, because I've learned through a lot of mistakes, be careful what you think, because that's what's going to happen. And it's just literally, I've had so many experiences of, okay, why did this happen? And literally in my mind, I have my inner voice saying, well, see, Jen, let me show you the film. This is where you asked for this. And literally, they will show me from the witness perspective exactly when I asked for that experience. And I'm going,
Yeah.
why did I ask for that? So to be empathetic is awesome, and it's a beautiful experience to truly understand what that person is going through. But as you said, you still got your own self, and it is your interpretation of what that person is going through. Even though you might be one, you're always going to have your true self.
A gentleman I know here in the Bay Area named Edwin Rutch, he'd be actually a really great guest. I need to connect you guys now. That popped into my head. He'd be a great guest for your show. He has the Empathy Center over in Berkeley, and we've had some pretty in-depth conversations about empathy. I think this idea that we need to have more empathy is not exactly right. And what I mean by that is we are always having an empathetic experience. It's just being aware that you are.
Mm-hmm.
And empathy doesn't, it's not always necessarily a pretty beautiful thing. We can be sharing very ugly experiences with one another. And we are. We come, and I think, well, I know that it's our empathy that we're denying. It's our empathy with nature. It's our empathy. It's this connection that we innately have, that we have chosen for a long time not to accept. But ultimately we can't escape that. It's the empathy that
No.
we share that is creating the collective illusion that we are now experiencing. And if we want to change this, we're going to have to awaken to that empathetic connection that we're sharing. Because right now, the way it's manifesting is still way too much pain and suffering, and it doesn't have to be this way.
And the other thing is everybody having an understanding that we all are having it, because you don't want people, as I said, you don't want to seem invasive in saying, I really can't relate to what you're saying, meaning you had that empathetic moment with them, because some people just get like, no, you don't. They get kind of turned off by you saying, I truly understand where you're coming from.
Right.
So it's that mixing um, of truly having a true understanding that we all are part of the oneness. We're all together in this beautiful illusion that we're playing this wonderful game, and not get too attached to even our emotions, because they're just emotions for us to experience. So it's it's one of those things that it's discernment. I think that's one of the most important lessons people can learn is discernment,
Hmm.
and understanding that we all are part of the oneness. We all can feel the same thing at the same time. It's like, think about 9/11 and how many people felt numb. I mean, I think that was a moment in the US that we really had an all encompassing feeling of empathy.
Hmm.
We all knew exactly what, we all were really in shock about this happening.
Well, and you know what? Not only were we as a nation having an empathetic experience, the whole world was having that empathetic experience with us. In fact, the experience actually started before the planes hit the building.
Right.
They showed the chatter, the web bot. The dialogue was already going on before the event occurred, which goes along with quantum mechanics and spirituality. And anyway, the wasted opportunity there, and this is a good example of how empathy can be uh, turned into not something positive.
Right.
We could have, and I was the first one. Anyone will tell you that what I told everyone around me, as I said, we need to take a breath. We need to step back from our fear in this, and we need to figure out how we're going to manage this from a place of reason, not reaction. Um, and we didn't. And instead of us taking that empathy that immediately took place all over the world, because people at that point in time, and we've done a lot of harm to this since then, they loved America. They loved what the dream of America stood for. And to see that happen, um, could have we could have taken it to a place of love. We could have taken it to a place of forgiveness. We could have united, like even a country like Iran felt great empathy and reached out to us to support us after that happened in a very meaningful way. Yet we said, nope, we're going to double down on fear, and we're going to take all this empathy and all this stuff we're feeling that we don't know what to do with, and we're going to go to war with everybody. And we're going to keep on building off of fear instead of taking that empathy and rebuild a foundation of love.
But they also took it the opportunity to make, and not only get everybody back into the fear mode, or many people, but they also, a lot of it was for greed, and
Oh,
and the
absolutely.
and the whole setup was just amazing.
But I
That
even think that the greed is another way that fear manifests
Oh
itself,
yeah,
because the Dick
definitely.
Cheneys, the people, those are really, you can hate them and despise them and despise what they are and stuff, but what you should really feel is sad for them. You should really feel a great deal of compassion, because they live every day of their life overwhelmed by fear. So when you hear people like
Hmm.
Lindsey Graham, you hear all these hawkish people out there, we've got to do this and and they're so worried about ISIS. And let's put some perspective on this. The odds of you getting killed by a terrorist is so remote, it's almost incalculable. you literally do have a better chance of getting attacked by a shark, which is also another thing that won't happen to you most likely.
No.
So step back from this for a second. Stop allowing your emotion be discerning. Be discerning about what you're feeling. Be discerning about how you're responding to these empathetic feelings that you're having. It can't always take you to that place of darkness. It's not always your feeling that you're having. It's Dick Cheney's feeling. It's Lindsey Graham's feeling. Are those your feelings? Ask yourself.
Right. And really um, figure out what your heart is telling you, and that's why a lot of people say follow your heart. Feel within yourself if that's really you or somebody else's feeling, and you're just having that moment of connection. So we were talking before, and you've stated that you've found different ways to separate yourself and understand where you are in the center of who you are. What are some of the things that you would suggest people do to
Well,
center themselves?
you touched on it a little bit when you were talking about the experience you had with uh, the woman that died and actually going through that with her and how it was not necessarily a pleasant experience. First of all, I think you have to allow yourself to open up to all of the other yous that are happening right now. And what I mean by that is infinity is the ultimate absolute oneness of everything. There aren't even really words to describe what that is, but just it is all infinities within the
Mm-hmm.
infinity itself. Each of us is infinite with infinite other experiences we are all having right now. We're living, dying, we're giving birth, we're black, we're white, we're women, we're Chinese, we're a tree, we're a butterfly, we're all of these things. Accept that in yourself and then find what thread runs through all of those experiences that is that soul self, that is that infinite thing that is allowing you to have all those experiences. Once you can begin to recognize that and be comfortable with going into that experience of yourself dying, of all of these things you might be afraid of, then it becomes, I think, much easier when you come back from your meditation or whatever practice you use to get yourself to a to the to those other experiences, to those other infinite, to your true self, not
Right.
this illusion that you see in the mirror, but that soul self. Before you come back to this or whatever experience you might go back to allow yourself to have gone to all these places, or at least accept that all those other places within you exist, all those other yous exist. That then when you come back here, it makes it much easier for you to discern your thread from all the other threads in the tapestry that create this particular tapestry of infinity of creation.
And that's excellent way of doing it. It's you need to know your true self first and foremost, and you definitely need to. For me, it's like really feeling myself breathe. Really focus on the heart and feeling my own heartbeat, grounding myself, and then it's like you get out of it. Seems almost like a lucid dream, the experience that you just are participating in this lucid dream where you are in the oneness and you're connecting with a certain
Yep.
person, um, to get a message from the other side to a certain person, or so you have that understanding, which reminds me of, for some reason I needed to understand. This happened back like 2005 or something. I got a very clear message I needed to go to California. Wasn't sure why, but I was supposed to go that day, but I waited a day and I missed an opportunity. Anyway, when I got there, I went to the Santa Monica Mall for some reason. I was guided to go there. So I go there, and the first person I meet is this guy and I'm in this sweatshirt. and it was cold out, so I just had a sweatshirt on. I didn't think anything of it. But I go up, and this guy goes, "If you're homeless, we have a shelter for you." And I go, "I'm not homeless. I'm just cold." "Oh, well, can you have $1 so we can help the homeless?" But that entire time, I noticed the homeless until I finally sat down with a group of homeless that were in the middle, playing music, having conversation. One was having a serious bleed through from some other realm of reality, another planet. I'm not sure what, but it was a serious, he had been in the military, and it really messed him up. But I sat there with the homeless, and I knew I was going to be okay if I was homeless. And and here I am. I have lost my home, and in a sense, if it wasn't out of the goodness of my mother, I would be homeless. But I knew I was going to be okay, regardless of the situation. So it's very interesting the experiences that are are before you, to have that understanding. No matter what you're going through, you're calling in the people to make you understand it's an experience, and you're going to be okay. It's
Well,
the
and
perception and the response of that experience that you take on.
and that's it exactly, is that, I think that by allowing yourself to have all these other experiences, um you move beyond fear. Uh, you are able to just perceive of these experiences as just that, experiences. I was telling you before we started recording, was that I'd ask for the experience. I said I while I was meditating, I said I wanted to know what it felt like to die. And next thing I know, I'm in Africa and I'm a black woman, and a truck runs into me and pins me to a wall. And I didn't feel any pain or fear. It was just an experience that happened. I asked to what it was like to, uh, have a child, and I was able to go to that place. And from this is how I know when I'm having um, the experience, and it's not some sort of dream, is at first you see the other as something other, and then you shift and you're now from their perception, from their perspective of being.
Mm-hmm.
And that and it's been really an amazing thing, because it's opened up something inside me to say, I'm all of these things that we perceive of and we put a good or evil, pain, pleasure, attachment to, they're just all experiences. They're not, there is no good or bad about these experiences. That is our perception in this illusion. But ultimately, there isn't any. And we keep telling ourselves that in order for this experience to be, there has to be this duality, this existence by comparison. You have to have pain to feel pleasure. And maybe as part of the learning process, or the process that leads you to your next transformation, maybe you do. But I think you get to a point where you don't need to anymore. And I'm starting to feel that more and more strongly every day, that this long held notion that with the pleasure comes the pain, that you have to have this other to experience the other thing. I'm really beginning to believe, as we move towards that next transformation, that uh, soul flowing experience from one to another being, that will move beyond that understanding, or that knowing, or that thinking, that belief that you have to have the other to have this, that
Right.
everything is love. Everything is love, period. There is no right or wrong, good or evil. It's all the experiences that you're choosing to have. Love doesn't differentiate. How you have those experiences is up to you. Do you embrace them? And a good experience, a true life story that will really, I think, help people to understand that this isn't, this is something that really has an impact in what you're perceiving of as yourself now. I had a really, really dear friend. In fact, he is probably the reason I'm alive today. So for a long time, I was a very, very heavy drinker. And I mean, I was to the point where I was going to die. I'd lost 50% of my liver function. I didn't know this at the time of this experience. I learned shortly after. I couldn't feel my legs from my knees down from the neuropathy, which is basically sort of a alcoholic neuropathy is the same thing as diabetic neuropathy. And I still have a little bit of that numbness in my feet. Anyway, this really amazing friend of mine, and his name was Eric Purdom. Eric was, by any stretch of the imagination, a word that's horribly overused, but not in his case. He was a genius. This guy put together the whole Red Bull marketing campaign. When I say put together, that he designed the cars and everything. He had his place up in Washougal, Washington, which was where I was from. Even though we didn't know each other when we were going to school, we had actually grown up in the same place. He'd built a
Wow.
mini Stonehenge. He raised buffalo. He designed shoes for Patagonia. He made his own guitars. He made pickled eggs. He made his own mead. He was just an amazing guy. I mean, he was living infinitely while he was here. And then he had gone with his family to Patagonia, not the shoe company, but actually the place. And he wasn't feeling great. And they all thought he had an appendicitis. And then we find out that he had this really, really, really rare form of cancer. At the time, only 70 people had ever had this cancer. It's called signet ring cell carcinoma. And what made his exceptionally rare is that it metastasized in his appendix, which like never happens. And so that's what they thought was going on at first, that he was in appendicitis. Well, they went in to try to take out his appendix and they couldn't find it. And they couldn't find it because it had calcified and pushed up under his gallbladder. And all of his organs had already begun to calcify, and there wasn't anything they could do. And he had a matter of months to live. He had a wonderful wife, wonderful children, wonderful family. By any stretch of most people's way of dealing with things, this is time to break down. This is time to lose it. This is time to, oh my God, why is life doing this to me? Why is life taking? Not Eric. Eric, I finally got to talk to him because he's obviously so sick, and he gets on the phone. He goes, and his voice was just so weakened and so fragile because I was, Kip, I am having the ass kicking of a lifetime. And then another great story is he's going through this process. So he couldn't eat anything, and Eric was a big guy. I'm like 6'5", and Eric was my size, only probably outweighed me by probably a good, 30 pounds maybe. And he couldn't eat anything because if he did, it would make him really painfully ill. And so his family was all around him all the time. They were super close family, and they were going through the whole process with him. Well, his mom had made a batch of cookies, and Eric saw these cookies, and then I described Eric liked his food, making the pickled eggs and the meat, and he liked to eat. And anyway, they'd made these cookies. They were out on the counter, and Eric goes and picks one up. He puts it in his mouth, and they're like, "No, Eric, you can't eat that. You're gonna get sick. We're gonna have to take you to the hospital." And they're all panicking, and Eric's just chewing and chewing and chewing on this cookie. He then turns in the sink and he spits the cookie out, and he said, "That was the best cookie I ever had." He finally died, and he died, and I saw a big smile on his face, surrounded by family. One other thing he'd done, or had done before he died, was he had this best friend, Bob. He had the wherewithal to tell his wife, he said, and Bob was a lot like him. He told his wife, he said, "It's okay if you want to be with Bob after I'm gone." And Nancy's with Bob now. But this was a man who truly had moved, was allowing this experience to happen. As painful as any of us could possibly imagine, he somehow made this a joyous experience. And that, I think, is proof that you don't have to live in this duality, that you can just embrace every experience for what it is. Because you don't have any control. You're not going to stop something like that. So don't fight it. Go with it. And that's sort of what I'm getting as I'm having these experiences is flow. Flow through all these experiences. Just like you're changing from Again, one TV show to another, going to see one movie or another, listening to a different type of music. You'll listen to one song, it's a sad song. Then you put on for a happy or uplifted. This is what it's about. It's about not becoming too attached to the feelings and allowing them to say, oh, that's a bad feeling and that means it's evil or something I shouldn't have the experience of. You should experience everything and you should experience everything in love.
And that was an amazing, amazing experience you had with him. And he is and has been teaching you the lesson that it's almost like he was teaching you, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, he really had it right. Or did you know in the moment that all this was happening, that it was teaching you that everything is love and not to attach? Or were you.
Eric and I had, even though we didn't know each other a really long time while he was alive, we had a really special connection because we he got it. He got the whole infinity thing in a way not many people I know could. I mean, we could talk about these things, and it expanded his mind. It expanded his way of thinking. The conversation was have just as he was expanding mine. I even in this conversation, I'm learning. I'm reliving that, and it in the with just the experiences I've had in the past couple of days, coming together with this story, just sharing it again, it's expanding me. Like I literally I felt Eric here with me now. It
Mm-hmm.
it was this was a really powerful share. Yeah, he was something special. And I wrote after he died, and I'm paraphrasing myself because he had a blog. This is how magical he was. After he died, his family set up a blog. 50,000 people from all over the world went to that blog.
Wow.
I mean, that's like Beatles type numbers, to go to your death blog and like 50,000 people are there and nobody, not an ill word from anyone. And I wrote, because he designed everything in his life, I wrote something very brief. I just said that it was time for Eric to move on. The universe was in need of his designs. Infinity was in need of his designs. And to sort of end why Eric saved my life was that um, I had chosen not to drink the day of his memorial. I drank a lot the day before, but out of respect, I wasn't going to drink. This was hard to do because I'd gotten to a point where I made the physical addiction so strong that I would start shaking really, really bad. And I didn't want people to notice that. Well, the memorial went on for like 4 hours. There were 400 people, and so many people got up and spoke. And so I'm just going, because after this, we were all going to his house to have a celebration. And I even had the bottle of vodka in the car, and I'm like, I just got to make it through this, and then I'll be out to the car. I'll be okay. Well, the end, and I was shaking pretty bad, and it was noticeable at this point. But I was managing to mask it enough. And then the memorial's over, and everyone was leaving. I went to stand up. My legs wouldn't work at all. And I've told this over and over, and I know it's true. Eric was sitting on my shoulders. He said, "You have stuff to do. You need to stop this." And that was that. I went later to the hospital, and I found out that I'd lost 50% of my liver function, that I was going to die. But that wasn't why I quit drinking. I didn't care. I wasn't afraid of dying. I hadn't been afraid of
Right.
dying for a long time. I quit because Eric let me know I had a purpose and an important purpose. And from there, and this was what, 8 years ago now, that's where I combined my understanding of infinity and all these things that I'd been experiencing in my life. And then I had the experience with love, where I felt that feeling of love as I walked into a room for everyone, just that feeling of falling in love. And I realized that's how we should feel about everything and everyone all the time. And I wouldn't be here to share any of this with you if it wasn't for Eric.
Which I'm gonna ask you a question in that. Why you were drinking so much? Do you think it helped you mask the feeling of infinity, or was it taking you to that place of infinity?
Um, it 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 really, I I wish it had some deep context to it. Mostly, it was a lot about being in so much pain, and it took away the pain. And basically, I got to a point where kind of just sleeping through life in a way, you know. But it really started more, in high school where I grew up. It was just kind of common that I did the music business, and you just drank all
Right.
the time. And me being me, I didn't do anything in a little way. And it went from just a thing I did to real quickly all of a sudden became a thing I had to do. And it wasn't like that I even really, I think at a certain point, liked to drink anymore. I just didn't want to feel bad. And when I wasn't drinking, I would feel even worse physically, on top of not feeling great just in life. Um, it was a way to numb myself, more or less. And it was also like I really didn't plan on living. I mean, this is actually kind of momentous that I'm 50 now because I never planned on living to 50. I took out a huge life insurance policy and everything. I didn't plan on seeing 50.
I didn't think I would see 40, and I'm way past that now. Way past. So obviously, I still have something to do. Um, and and part of it probably is connecting with you and sharing these wonderful messages about love and the truth that love really is, and the life that we are experiencing is really, that's our free will choice, is we can choose to be in this space of love at all times. Go ahead and feel those emotions because we are human, and that's part of the game, is playing with those emotions, but as you said, not attached to them.
And don't be afraid. I mean, it's been said before that I mean, famous quote, and that you're in this world, but you're not of it.
Yes, and we're here to have that experience and to um, expand our reality even more so within this illusion. And I mean, there's so many people that are saying we heard this call to help humanity and to help Mother Earth, and yet at the same time, Mother Earth really doesn't need humanity. Um, but we do need to kind of help humanity understand that the emotion of fear and all the negative aspects, or all the aspects of fear, are really nothing to really embrace, to live off of. It can be a motivator because if you don't want to be a certain way, it can push you towards the love vibration even more. Um, but I think a lot of people are using fear as a predatory more than really embracing the idea of, yes, there is some emotion with it, but they're trying to make others.
Well, we've institutionalized it.
Exactly.
We've made it our foundational operating system, and that's the problem. It's not that it can't be another experience we have. It certainly is, but it's where we're coming from all the time, and that's not right. That's not how it's supposed to be. Well, let me rephrase. However, you're having the experience is how you're choosing to have the experience. But just know that if you aren't liking this experience of being in feeling this way, feeling fearful all the time, then you can choose to have the experience of love differently if you
Mm-hmm.
want. But if you're choosing to do this, love God, all of these things aren't looking at you going, wow, they're really miserable, and gosh, why, they don't, the infinity doesn't ask that question. It just says, wow, that's the experience they want to have. Just in the same way that, an actor takes a role and, maybe takes a role as a psycho killer or a murder victim
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. Well, they just take the role to play the role. We forget that we're playing a role. We
Yes.
forget we're just having this experience. And one thing I did want to say is I've said to a lot of on several times in my shows, and that I wouldn't change any of the experiences I had. In hearing that, a lot of people would probably go, "God, I would never want to live through that again." I would. I had to. I had to be where I'm at today, to be on this, be able to share this with all of you, to be able for you to know that that I have the shared experiences, that it was a hollowing out, that it was a building back up, that you don't have to, that as dark as things can get for you and as hopeless as things can get, there's always love, always. And
Yes.
and if you open your heart, you will find your way back to it.
Yes. And if you don't understand a situation somebody is in, a lot of people don't mind you asking how you're doing, how are you getting through this. I mean, there's a lot of times I have a sister who had no idea what was going on when I lost my home. I finally told her, and it totally shifted her perspective on me. She's more compassionate, she's more open, where she was having so many judgments against me because she didn't understand. I chose to just let her know what I was going on because I wanted the experience that I was having with her to be a more loving one than this negative, judgmental, very repressive um, experience. So you don't understand what I've gone through. This is what I was going through at that time. And it totally shifted because it wasn't part of her perspective of that possibility. She had never had that experience. And until you share those experiences, some people aren't going to get it. Like I totally understand the whole concept of what it's like and the peace of mind that people are taking who are homeless. They might not have liked the situation that got them to that place, but a lot of people are wanting to do something better, to rebuild their lives in a different way. I know every single person that I talked to in that experience said, I want to go back to school. I know I can figure this out. I have people I'm talking to. They didn't want to stay in that situation. They wanted to improve. It's like, yes, that happened, but I'm going to move on. I want something better. And one of those people was actually a single mom, and she had a child, and the guy had promised to take care of her, and he disappeared and left her with nothing. So it's all the experiences are happening because number one, we asked for it, and number two, it was something to help us grow.
Yep, and I think to bring it, sort of bring it back to, uh, the empathy. I think what we're really talking about is we're unaware of our empathy right now, and if we open ourselves up and become aware of the empathy that we all share, then the emotions that we're feeling from other people don't feel like an attack. And I think right now that empathy feels to a lot of us, to most of humanity, as if it's an attack, but we don't know what we're feeling. We just know we're feeling bad all of a sudden. And we know it's not necessarily our feeling, so it must be someone else who's causing this. Instead
Right,
of understanding that nobody's actually trying to make you feel bad, it's how they're feeling, and you're just feeling it with them.
right, exactly. Is there any other final words? Do you have any other writings you want to? We have about 2 minutes left.
Let me see, what do I have that could be a good share here? I'm so glad I got to share that story with Eric. That really,
Yes, thank you. That was
yeah,
I had tears in my eyes.
you and me both. And like I said, it was that feeling I got when Dr. Jamie Turndorf was on the show, and her husband, that was this came into me. That was the same feeling I just had. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate your being here with me and for all you've done. Let's see. What shall we read? How about let's see this. And God, the infinite consciousness, soul of infinity, sent Oshala, the messenger of love, coming not to bring the wisdom of new understandings, but to remind humanity of the wisdom of understandings of soul, love, and infinity already brought to them by the many messengers shared throughout the millenniums before. His only message was this: you already know. Now all you must do is remember and surrender to be, for all your dreams of heaven to be experienced. And then this is from Marianne Williamson. Something amazing happens when sorry. Something amazing happens when we surrender and just love. We melt into another world, a realm of power already within us. The world changes when we change. The world softens when we soften. The world loves when we choose to love the world.
Beautiful. And Kip, real quick, when is your show on?
My show is on every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Pacific time, that's California time, or 10 p.m. Eastern time, New York time. And you can find me on Facebook, Kip Baldwin, or you can go to my website. That is justlovemovement.com. Again, justlovemovement.com. And the show is aired on WLOR.net every Wednesday at 7 p.m. and 10 p.m.
And again, Kip Baldwin, thank you so much. A wonderful conversation as always.
Absolutely.
And this is Jennifer Hillman saying, with each breath of
Thank you,
air,
Jen.
you're welcome. With each breath of air, we hope you gain new insights and inspirations. Till next time, take care.